There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and a really special conversation. I'm joined today by two very special people. One is my mom, Helen Breeze Books. Hello, Mom.
Hi there. Good to be here.
Yeah. She and I are going to jointly interview the Irish writer Gráinne Murphy about her 2024 novel, Gráinne, which Mom and I have both read and enjoyed very deeply. Gráinne, welcome.
Thank you so much, Shawn. Hello, and hello, Helen. I'm delighted to be chatting to you both today from fairly sunnyish West Cork.
That's good. April is not so cruel there. It's been a little bit cruel here in Saskatoon.
Weather-wise, we've been okay.
Let's start actually with the epigraph. I didn't ask you, but would you mind reading the epigraph and then telling us?
Oh, sure. I'm delighted you asked because I love this epigraph. So this is from a Claire Shaw poem called What the Frog Taught Me About Love. So it's just a little extract from it, and it says, "Goose says just be born to it. Dog says roll yourself in it. Be governed by fear of loss of it. Cat says you can always leave. Bowerbird says go to great lengths for it. Penguin walks hundreds of miles for it. Firefly burns very bright for it. Frog just holds on tight." I love Claire Shaw and I love their poetry, and that particular one, when I was thinking about epigraphs for the book, and very much one of the themes of the book is about how we love people according to who we are and not according to who they are. So an awful lot of it is about our own capacity and how we see the world. And that poem just says it so much better in like 12 or 14 lines, what takes me like 80,000 words. Poetry is just extraordinary. So I was thrilled to be able to use it, and that Bloodaxe Books gave permission.
The prose of Gráinne Murphy is also extraordinary, so let me put that out there right before we go much further.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to read the opening page and a couple more
Sure.
lines, and then
Yeah.
get us started.
Yeah, happy to. That'll give us a good sense of where the book starts. So each of the chapters has a title, and the title is taken from a line that pops up within the chapter, which was something I've been waiting to do. I've been waiting to find the right book to do this with, and this was the one, so I'm delighted. So I'm going to read the chapter title as well. And chapter 1 is called Time Rather Than Space. A whisker over 14 hours, 2 in the air and 12 in her head, and Helen was at the narrower side gate, looking at the house through the iron bars like a Dickens orphan. Same view of the drive, same gravel underfoot, same code for the gate, as if she'd never left, as if the trains and planes and taxis had conspired to move her through time rather than space. Her hand on the gate told her the time had passed. She extended her fingers to their fullest and watched the flesh pucker and gather. Her skin cross-hatched like tweed, her nails with their little half-moons that, despite frequent manicures, always looked like they were struggling. She'd watched the moon rise one night, and sure enough, its own edges were ragged. No crisp lemon-rind distinction, but a trailing off of pale into dark. She liked it more after that, ragged as it was, determinedly hanging in the sky above her. Who hung the moon? Wasn't that a song or a poem, a story, something? "Hello, Annie," she would say. She could say that much with ease, then leave a space that Annie could fill with whatever she liked. Professional distance or gushy catching up, it was all the one to Helen. Her hand on the garden gate, pushing it open, waiting for the squeak, a long moment when change seemed possible, but then there it was, hearing it and feeling what? Sick, maybe, or starving. She held her emotions in her stomach. Every therapist and healer and alternative remedy specialist had always told her. Every conventional medic, too, albeit in weightier language. She had to peer past the money to see it. "Hello, Annie," she would say. "How's he doing?" Oh, stop there.
Yeah, it's lovely. So that introduction sets up a lot of questions for the reader. I remember what I was assuming this novel was going to be about based on that first part of it, that she was going home to talk to a stepmother, perhaps.
Yeah, I think
not
a
quite
lot
how
of
it
people thought that. Yeah.
This is going to be a spoiler-free chat. It's not a particularly plot-driven novel. There's a couple things that we don't want to tell you about because they are kind of spoilers, and so we're just not going to talk about them. So you can watch the whole darn video from beginning to end, and you don't have to turn it off early. tell us more about the opening premise.
Okay, when I started thinking about Greeners, this would have been in 2021, 2022, we were deep into COVID at that stage. We were not sure if we would have a post-COVID or what post-COVID might look like. So I very much wanted to think about that at the time. There was a lot of talk online and from agents and from publishers that people wouldn't ever want COVID novels, that they weren't going to be a thing. And I remember thinking, that's a bit ridiculous. Is every novel now going to be set in 2019 and that's it? Like the world ended in 2019 and there's no more. So I knew it was going to have to be incorporated somehow because it had done, as far as I was concerned, fairly fundamental things to how people viewed friendship and family. And I knew this was going to be a book about friendship and about family. Because one of the things that became really clear to me during COVID was the role that proximity plays in friendship, particularly during that time. You could only really see and meet and hang out with the people who lived very close to you, because we were, I'm not sure what your rules were, but ours were you had a 2 kilometre radius that you could go and walk in once a day. So you're seeing the same people, you're waving at them. When things got a little bit more relaxed, you're sitting out on the footpath outside your house and they're sitting outside theirs and you're drinking your own bottle of wine and waving at people and talking and that sort of thing. So the idea of the geography of friendship, I think, became very clear to me, or very vivid to me. And it reminded me that sort of closeness and proximity wasn't really a thing in friendship since I'd been a teenager. When you're in and out of friends' houses and when your friendships are, for the most part, chosen according to where people live near you. So you're friends with the people that you get to hang out with all the time. So those were the sorts of things I was thinking about. And then that whole opening sequence came in one big pile. It just came like all together. I was going to a graveyard locally, big old stiff white graveyard. I put my hand on the graveyard gate to push it open. And that tweedy cross-hatching thing that Helen talks about in the opening paragraph, I noticed that my hand did that. And I thought, Jesus, maybe it was a long time since I looked at the back of my hand. I don't know, but I thought it could be 20 years since I was here before. And I thought, ooh, imagine if there was that length of a gap between something. So that the idea that somebody was opening a gate and going back to a place where they hadn't been for a long time was with me, I suppose, early on, and the idea that it would be a kind of a friendship thing. My writing course with Adam Barron, who's great, and his favorite thing to ask always was what would make it worse. Didn't matter what you were writing, you'd be writing something and he'd say, what would make it worse? And what would make it worse? And what would make it worse? And I was thinking, okay, so someone's opening a gate, they haven't been at home for a long time. What would make it worse? Okay, so maybe it's a family home and there's one parent left and it's the one they liked less. And then what would make that worse? Okay, there's something wrong with the parent who's left and she hasn't been able to see him. What would make it worse? Ooh, the door is opened by somebody she doesn't want to see. And there we were. That was the book. Obviously, it took ages to figure out what the rest of it was going to be. And Laura didn't arrive for a while and it was a whole thing. But Helen and Annie and that complicated dynamic of, not that they were sharing the dad, but because Annie and Laura didn't have dads, that Jack was the sort of the dad figure that they were all orbiting around as teenagers, and now the 3 women are still orbiting him as adults, which I thought was interesting.
Tell us more about Helen and then tell us more about Annie.
Okay, so Helen and Annie were the original 2. So they were the friends from very young, from the first day of primary school, when Helen noticed Annie's purple pencil case and made a comment, I like your purple pencil case. And they became friends and they stayed. They were the original 2. They were stuck together. They were known for being stuck together in school. The teachers sat them together. They were associated with each other, including when they moved on to secondary school. And as always happens, in my experience, when you have been friends with somebody for a very long time, the roles in the group are very defined. So you have, in Helen's case, the person who she's slightly cooler. She has the sort of cool house. Her dad, Jack, has a cool job. He's an actor on a soap. The mother is a little bit delicate. She's a bit more freedom, a little bit more independence. Annie, by contrast, her home life is a little bit busier. There's very little quiet. She maybe isn't seen as much at home. So escaping to Helen's house is very much what she enjoys doing. Annie is more the rule-based person, let's say, to Helen's chaos. And she is very much I'm going to say the good girl, maybe. She falls into that kind of good girl pattern. She does what she feels needs to be done. So for example, when she's a little bit older, she gives up the life she had imagined for herself and comes home to mind her mother when her mother is ill. And then I suppose her own life, or the life she had thought that she might have, gets further and further away from her. So when we meet her as an adult, she's in this sort of in-between space where it's not really clear to her what of her life she has chosen and what she has just ended up with. And then Laura, is the third leg of the stool, and they don't become friendly with Laura until they're in first year. When They're put together. Laura is new to the school. Her mum was a teacher there, which of course brings its own difficulties. And she is paired up, let's say, or not pair, you can't pair three people, whatever the word is, I should know the word. She is put together with Helen and Annie after Annie's father dies, so that because she has experience in this, so the teachers don't know how to talk to Annie about it, so they give that job completely inappropriately to a 13-year-old and say, well, you sit with her, you mind her, you talk to her. And then Helen accepts Laura, and the three of them are suddenly a trio.
So then I want to go back to that opening scene because it's Annie who's going to answer the door, and you keep us in suspense for dozens of pages about exactly why is Annie there. But not a spoiler to say that Annie is Jack's live-in carer.
Caregiver.
Yeah,
Caregiver.
yeah,
And also that before she had that specific role, she and Jack had become really close friends.
they had. Yeah, Jack had helped Annie at a time in her life when she needed help. And that idea of intergenerational friendship, I also thought was really important. And I tried to be absolutely clear that they were friends. They were good friends. They were good to each other. They were good for each other. They were just friends. And I still get people saying, no, there was more to it than that, surely. No, they were friends.
And I
People
think
of
that
different ages can be friends.
absolutely, and I think whether it was conscious or unconscious, as a reader, I was like, so, okay, what's really going on there? And Helen wonders, and Annie herself is kind of defensive about it, and so I just wonder, what's but absolutely, they're just friends.
They are just friends, yeah.
And how do I want to put this? There is a mystery well into the second half of the novel about why Helen is estranged from Annie and Laura. And we're not going to talk about what that is, but that was weird and wonderful to keep us wondering about that. That part deeply worked for me.
It's really about shame, but it's hard to talk about without talking about how deeply that sort of shame would resonate for girls who were growing up in the 80s and 90s, so women in their 40s.
And I would add in here about Annie and Helen. It seems to me that they viewed Jack in a very different way. And when they were growing up, Jack was a very different person in Helen's view. He was her father, and how he treated her was so different in how she viewed him. And Annie, who was a friend, saw him more as a hero figure in the sense he was on a soap and so on. And so that was very noticeable to me. That
Absolutely. That she saw
him as younger women, as young people.
Yeah, they did. He definitely had that sort of exotic and the charming for an outsider to the house, whereas all Helen saw was that her mother was flapping around him the whole time and had no real time for Helen herself, whereas everybody else just saw the glamour. Yeah,
that was well done.
That was fun to do. I really enjoyed writing Jack. He was very good fun, and actually it might be a good time because I was thinking about this recently about where the character of Jack came from and what made me think of him. I don't know if it's been in Canada, but there's a play called Tom Crean Antarctic Explorer, which is a one-man show, which is the most amazing one-man show. If you ever get a chance to go and see it, it's wonderful, by an Irish actor called Aidan Dorley. And I've gone to see it several times. And I went to see it the first time and I was blown away, and I went to see it the second time and I was blown away, and I went to see it the third time. Maybe around the third or fourth time I started worrying, because he's been doing it now for 25 years, just this one role, and he does this one play the whole time. And I started to worry about Aidan Dorley, the actor, that how does he know when he's making decisions? Is he making decisions as Aidan or as Tom Crean? Does some part of him believe that there's an overlap? No, I don't know the man. He seems absolutely fine. This is entirely like an imaginary problem that I had. And I started worrying about him. And then I thought, okay, so when I was thinking about Helen's family, I thought, okay, I'm going to have Helen's dad in a role, but he's not necessarily the one who's worrying about if it's him or not. It's going to be a thing that she uses to needle him. But she's going to, like, you're unknowable. I don't know which one you are. And that was huge fun.
Yeah, and as Mom said, and I would just extend that into as adults, Laura and Annie, their relationship with Jack it's not completely different. Helen has basically cut off anything but just cursory contact with her dad for about 20 years. They have a big fight at her mom's funeral. And was that 20
No, it was more recent.
more recent?
But not that much more recent though, yeah.
And so they have filled a gap for Jack because doesn't really have any contact with his only kid.
Absolutely.
Where did
Yeah.
she live? Did she live in America?
No, she lived somewhere in Northern Europe. I went over and back. I think she probably lived in the Netherlands. And that was
Okay,
a thing that
I've forgotten exactly
yeah,
where she lived,
yeah.
but it was not close by.
But close enough that she could have come back. It would have been possible. It wasn't Australia or anything.
That's right. And Laura and Helen and Jack are all estranged from Helen. So all of that is what's going on for her as she comes in that opening scene. And it's so uncomfortable. She's in the house. Jack has had a stroke, so he is now not able to speak.
Yeah, non-verbal, yeah.
Nonverbal. Annie's wonderful with him. Helen is so uncomfortable.
They're
Yeah,
very awkward. Yeah, awkward with each other. Yeah. It's an
they
awkward
really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And of course, Annie can be wonderful with him, partly because he's her friend, and partly because it's her role, and partly it's her training. But also, she doesn't have the same expectations of him that Helen has, which is what you were saying, Helen. Her view of him is different. The responsibility of making decisions for him isn't hers either, which is huge. That's such a weight on people. So once you take that away, you can just do the day to day and the practical and the let's work with what we have and have as much fun and as much life as we can. Because the bigger looming things you won't have a say in.
And she is a caregiver.
She is, yeah.
She looked after her mother. Yeah.
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 She did.
I meant to lead with this. I'm wearing a green shirt again, and
Yes.
and the title of this book is Greener. So I think it's time we get into why it's called Greener and
Okay.
all that. It's pretty metaphorical, I think.
It really is. I don't know if I said this to you before, but I'm very weird about titles. So before I start writing anything, I will spend months what I call kind of wool gathering. So like making notes, walking around, thinking about things. I'll roughly know the characters that I want. They'll have appeared. I'll be clear enough on what they are. I'll usually have an idea where the book is going to start and where it's going to end. I will have no idea what happens in the middle. That's fine. But I can't ever start until I have the title. Nothing will work for me because the title gives me the direction or the kind of thematic direction. So months into the wool gathering and the walking and the thinking and all the rest of it, this was called Green for quite a long time. And I couldn't start. It wouldn't come to life for me. I couldn't get it to snap. I didn't want to start. It was a weird kind of a feeling. And I live near an estuary, and I was walking by the estuary one of the days. And if you do the same walk all the time, you know this, you notice small changes become very clear because you don't have to think about where your feet are going. So you're looking at everything that's around you. And I thought, oh, everything is way greener than it was yesterday. And I thought, that's it. Greener, not green, greener. Because built into that was all of the comparison that makes up so much of the book. So the women are comparing themselves to each other. They're comparing themselves to who they were as teenagers. And Greener as well also has that the grass is always greener. It has the envy thing. It has the innocence thing. And it has all of the sort of symbolism of the garden because the garden is so important in the book, Jack's garden, and that's why Laura is still in the picture. So that whole, it seemed to have everything, and I started writing them, and that was fine. Yeah, I knew then that this whole idea of comparison in this 3-person group and the sort of who were we now versus who were we then thing is the core of it. Yeah.
Yes, and gardening as a metaphor for human relationships, tending to your human. So there's a sentence here that really jumped out at me. This was what happened when friendships withered. You were stuck in a weird limbo between the closeness of the past and the politeness of strangers.
Yeah, people know where the bodies are buried, and unless you've kept up with them, it's very uncomfortable and very awkward. And you don't know, does this mean we can cut past the small talk stuff, or are we just stuck in this loop where we're both pretending that actually we didn't see you vomit that time, or whatever it is? It's too much history. It's really awkward. But the awkwardness was fun to write. It's not fun when it's you yourself, but it's fun to do for other people. Yeah.
Mom is a veteran gardener. Do you have anything to say or ask about the gardening part of the story?
I can certainly see what you mean by one day it's this way and the next day you go back and it's grown. It's greener.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But also the greener on the other side is a big thing. Greener on the other side.
Yeah, or the life that people think they might have had if things had been different or whatever. Yeah.
That whole, yeah.
Mm.
And Laura's shall we say, philosophy. Laura's philosophy of gardening is pretty unconventional. And when Helen goes out, I think for maybe a cigarette or something, she thinks the garden's a big mess. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I should preface this by saying I don't garden. I'm hopeless in the garden. I like sitting in it. I don't do anything out there. But yeah, I don't like manicured gardens. I like everything to be just disheveled and a bit neglected. Not neglected looking, but a bit sort of normal looking or a bit wild looking or just let things do what they will, don't interfere too much kind of a thing. So I wanted to give that to Laura, but also because, again, during COVID, there was a sense of like nature coming back into itself and everything being less human controlled and human derived. And I thought a garden was a really useful way of being able to visualize that. Can humans just get out of the way for the moment and let things do what they're going to do? I felt Helen needed to hear that. Helen standing in for those of us who might be, somewhat controlling some of the time, that Helen needed to like loosen up a little bit, and Laura and the garden were going to be a useful way of her being able to visualize that. Yeah. Yeah.
I know you've recently left Twitter, but you were big on Twitter during COVID, were you not?
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
all those tweets about nature is healing.
Yeah. I live in the countryside, like it's a really small village. There's, I don't know, maybe 800 or 900 people. So it's very, we were really lucky in our 2 kilometers. So we had the waters, we had the estuary, and we had the forest. And it was very, it just felt like people were looking at the right thing. And there was that moment where everything was hopeful and there was a sense that the world might slow down a bit properly. And then it didn't. Everything just went back. And people were very quick to go back. And I think I was disappointed with that. Obviously, economics, market forces, and all the rest of it. But I worry about the power that we give that. So, yeah, there was that moment, that brief moment where a different future for everybody seemed possible. And then it just didn't happen. Just one example. So, when our radius that you could move around in was extended to, I think, about 20 kilometers. We managed to get close enough that we met my parents. So my parents are older, so they would have been in their like mid-70s maybe at the time. So we managed to meet them, and my husband ended up cutting my dad's hair at the side of the road. Like he had clippers, and he was trying to, and my dad's hair had gone completely out of control after about 6 months. It's like tufts of white hair, like flying all over the place, and people were walking their dogs, and it was a joke that they'd form a queue to get their hair cut, and it was this whole thing. And it just, everything felt different. And I'm not saying COVID was great and everything was better. Obviously, it wasn't, and it was a hugely difficult and complicated time. But from the point of view of slowness and looking at things that we don't normally look at, I think there was definitely something there that I was sorry to see finish when COVID finished.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's a very important thing that you create, that it's not just COVID, it's a freak snowstorm where Helen and Laura and Annie are thrown together for a couple days at least. I want to go back to, you made some really interesting comments about controlling the garden and giving up control and how controlled Helen was. So I'm just going to read this. This is one of my favorite paragraphs. Helen's voice, this is Helen through the eyes of Laura. Helen's voice was modulated. In fact, everything about her seemed to murmur control, from her neat trousers and trainers to her pinback hair. If she were to turn her upside down and shake her, Laura thought, her internal organs would fall out in alphabetical order.
Yeah. You should never really, from the point of view of shame, should never really say that something made you laugh yourself when you were writing it, but that made me laugh.
Oh, I don't wonder.
Yeah.
That's a good opportunity for me to say this is also a very funny book. You're a very funny writer and lots of insight, but lots of whimsy as well.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of black humor that I find very funny. And I think it would be typical of a lot of Irish writers. And there's a lot of conversation about why that happens and why it's particularly typical. And I don't know if it's weather related, if there's a sense of you have to make your own fun when you're stuck inside and it's dark and rainy a lot of the time. Some of it's obviously a post-colonial holdover. What can you do? You can only laugh. You have no control over your country or your language or your say or your voice or whatever. And some of it then I think is a Hiberno-English thing, that some of our expressions are naturally more whimsical just because of the way the Irish language is set up. And when you translate them into English, they're just a little bit more colourful, let's say. I read a book called Mouthing by Orla Mackey. It was one of my favourite books last year. And she's superb on Hiberno-English expressions. And she has this whole section on a dad and 2 sons. And the dad is a farmer, and he's a real farmer. And the two sons go out drinking at the weekend and they come home talking about the fear. And the dad doesn't understand the fear at all. He's sure, what's there to be afraid of? You're down the pub talking to the neighbours. What are you? So he confuses the fear with being afraid, which is very funny. And his line is just keep between the two ditches and drive on, as in just live your life. So but our expressions can be a lot more colorful. Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to add, just put in a little bit of how I
Oh, no,
connected. I am a gardener and I'm this kind of a gardener and I identify exactly with what you're talking about, what Laura. You put the garden in, you put it in, and everything is nice and clean. You've got the weeds all hoed out of it. You put it in, it's up, and you hoe it one more time, and then you just leave it for a month. And so everything, because you have to hoe it that one time after stuff comes up, you don't want the weeds all coming up around it so that the things you've planted can't grow. But read it that about a month after you've planted, and then you let it go for another month. And my garden just looks, by the 1st of August, it's just completely covered with dill. Other stuff still has enough room to grow. So it looks like a wild thing.
Which
and
is
flowers at one end and dill at the other. And that to me is a wonderful garden.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to clarify the vocabulary because I think in Ireland and the UK, doesn't garden mean backyard? It doesn't mean
yes.
Garden?
Oh no, garden is backyard. Yeah. So it would
So
encompass your lawn or your patio or your whatever.
So garden means the spot that you've cleaned off to grow vegetables and flowers.
Oh, so what do you call the full space? That's everything. That's
the
like a
backyard or the yard.
Backyard.
Front yard and backyard.
Yeah. Whereas here we say we would use yard. So I would use yard for ours sometimes because it's tiled. So yard would imply a hard surface.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Whereas garden would imply grass.
Yeah.
And what do you call it where you would grow potatoes and carrots and flowers?
Oh, vegetable garden or a vegetable patch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a little bit of a mismatch in what we Canadians are saying, but it's all on a spectrum. So.
That's a good clarification. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought of it about 4 minutes ago and then it went out of my head.
Yeah.
But the main thing about the book, the reason I was even drawn to reading it was because it was about friendship. And such an important thing to me. And I think that's why I loved it, because it was like, I'm an older person, so I have friends that I've known since I was a young girl. And I'm thinking about friends that are old friends like that. You don't have to repeat a history.
Yeah.
You grow up with a history, but at the same time, you don't, and you've done that so well in that book. They expected certain things when they were teenagers, but as adults, and especially when Helen hadn't been in touch with them, you're still seeing that person as a teenager, and you kind of come together again and realize, no, people change.
And then the question of whether you can stay friends is, can you change with them? Can you change your view of who they are? Because if you're stuck in that old paradigm, then that's not working for anyone. I worry about this sometimes. If you're out with a group of friends and the conversation is very much focused on nostalgia or this who you used to be, and I sometimes come away thinking, is that all we have now though? And I worry about too many things, but that's one of the things I worry about occasionally. So again, the book was a good way of exercising some of that.
Very much.
And I don't know if you created the tagline, but the tagline is, they say you can never make new old friends.
I did create, and I created it in order to keep the title. So Legend have been brilliant all along with my titles, and my titles are not exactly maybe the most obvious, but they would be very fixed in my mind because they've been there from the moment, I said that earlier, from the moment I start writing, and this is the direction I'm going. I had been down at a book festival and for my previous book, Winter People, and someone had asked that question about titles, and I was saying, oh, they're great. Legend are always great about titles, and I've never had an issue. And I came out of the event and opened my phone and had an email from Legend saying, we're not sure about the title Gráinne. And I was like, so I thought for a little while, and then I offered them a few options, one of which was to take one of the lines from the book that had Gráinne in it and use that as the title. So one of them is Everything Brighter and Greener is one of the things. Slightly too happy and peppy title for something I've written, I think. Or I suggested the tagline. So this was the compromise that we had. I'm not a huge fan of taglines, but this one works, I think, to explain the title. I think they were right about that. Yeah.
Let me pay the highest compliment I can to your tagline. I don't like taglines at all, and I love this one.
Oh, good.
So there you go.
I would just like to say how much I enjoyed the book. I really did.
Thank you.
enjoy it very much. It was a touchstone in a way for me at my age, and I have made friends with people who were very old friends to me, and we have a very close knit group. And so it resonated in many ways.
Thank you very much. It really means a lot to hear that. Resonate is definitely the word I like hearing best. And my books that I like best myself when I'm reading are what I would call bittersweet books that just leave you with just a little residue of something afterwards, and you maybe think a little bit differently about some small thing, or there might be a line maybe that you would take with you. And I do that a lot, where I would take a line from books and remember it and try and hold on to it. So I love the idea that somebody would find that in one of my books. Thank you.
I'm going to not ask you the question I had in my brain a minute ago. Instead, I'm going to ask you a follow-up to what you just said. Can you tell us some of the books that you were writing to, that were part of your literary writerly consciousness as you wrote Gráinne?
Oh, that's a really good question. I had been thinking a fair bit about friendship. So I think was it just as I was finished the first draft, so between the first and second draft, I read Elizabeth Day's Friendaholic, which I'm sure I mentioned to you before, which is a book of essays on friendship that I found very useful. She talks a lot about reciprocal stretch. So about whether or not friendships can accommodate growth in an individual. This is something I also think about a lot with therapy. So the idea that growth in one person or change in one person has a wider impact that maybe we need to be a little bit more aware of. I don't think I was reading anything specifically on friendship when I was writing it, because I would be afraid of bleed, that you get something that's creeping in a little bit. So you write something and you think, oh God, that's lovely. Oh, wasn't that lovely? And then you go back and you think, yeah, that's not lovely. That was in the style of somebody that I was reading last week whose writing is lovely, and this isn't me, and this doesn't fit, and take it out. So there is a share that happens. But I hear writers a lot saying that they can't read while they're writing a first draft just because of that bleed. But I think, how could you cut out reading fiction? Like, it would just be way too much time. I couldn't do that either. Frequent kind of comfort reread that I would have, that I reread when I was writing Gráinne, was Carol Shields. I love Carol Shields, absolutely adore her. So Larry's Party is a massive favorite of mine.
Yeah.
It's one of the books that lives on my desk because I love pretty much everything about it, and I find her really inspiring. So when I want just beautiful sentences and a great story and things that are just a little bit left field, I would pick her up. Yeah.
Gráinne, you are a very interesting writer, and you're just one of the best guests ever. I'm trying to think of what I can have to interview you about next week at this time, because I just want you to come back on a regular basis.
Here's where I mentioned a puddle of shame and Irish embarrassment. Yeah, but thank you. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
What a wonderful novel. Gráinne by Gráinne Murphy. I highly recommend it. And Gráinne, thanks so much.
Thank you, Shawn, and thank you, Helen. Delighted that you both enjoyed the book, and thank you so much for your time.